interesting and different types of presentations. So we have about 1 hour, and we're kind of be pressed for time on this. So we want to really use the time as efficiently as we can. And I have with me here James Goebel. Is that correct? James Goebel?
That is correct.
Okay, and he is one of the founders of Menlo Innovations. And before we actually begin the interview process, I just wanted to give you kind of an idea of how all this came about. We met James in Dallas at the PMI World Congress back in about a year and a half ago, I guess. And both myself and Kay Weiss, who's been an instrumental person in helping to have IPM Day grow, met with James and gave us kind of an overview on his process and what they do at Menlo. And we said, you know what, we have to go there and see it. And he said, well, we give tours all the time, and I saw a sign coming into the place that said they've given 127 tours of this facility. So it is really kind of an amazing place. It's wide open, about 18,000 square feet of space, all of which is extremely open, and it's very, very different than many corporate environments that you might see. And we're going to get into a lot of the information about that and the environment and the Agile approach that Menlo uses as we move forward. So I'm actually going to get started right away and introduce James. James, if you would just say hello to the folks out there and a quick introduction about yourself.
Hi, I'm glad you could all join today. As stated previously, my name is James Goebel. My role here at Menlo is probably Chief Operating Officer is probably the best description. I have a PMP, although I probably guide our project managers. I no longer personally practice running projects. But spend a lot of time working with our clients and our team on how to be more effective and actually achieve our mission.
Okay. All right. I'm just going to make a quick sound adjustment here so we can make sure that everybody hears all the stories and information that James will be telling us. So as we get started, there's just a couple of different things here. Menlo Innovations is in Ann Arbor, Michigan. And we will make sure that you have information about how to get in touch with them at the end. Now, the intent of today's webinar and interview is not necessarily to promote Menlo Innovations and do a sales pitch or anything like that. It's really just to show you that Agile is alive and well and working. And of course, being Agile, every company that uses it will adapt to a way that works best for them. I also want you to be aware that this is a live environment, which means there are people working, so you might hear a little bit of background noise, and that is really part of this this whole live presentation. Okay, so I'm going to address a couple of questions right up front here. Okay, as soon as I can get this to move on to the next slide. Okay, so I'm going to start with some questions to James about the environment. And I'm going to be very specific about the questions and how this was organized and what they're living pretty much day to day. And the environment that I'm going to start with, James, is that it's a trust-built company. So can you just talk a little bit about this idea of this trust-built company?
So we believe that teams are going to be more effective when they can actually work well together. We believe in order to do that, they need to be able to function transparently, both the teams and the management, as well as try and get our clients to function as transparently as possible. And in order to do that, that requires a great deal of trust. And part of what we teach inside of our team is actually based on a book by Patrick Lencioni, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. And basically a premise that he lays out is that in order for you to be effective, you have to be able to have conflict, productive conflict. Conflict that doesn't hurt people's feelings, but is actually still vigorous. And in order to do that, you will only have that kind of conflict with people you trust. And you can't build trust except through significant effort in building over time.
And I saw just a little bit of that evidence of trust here, because as we walk through the entire facility, going stage by stage and area by area, and like I said, it's very, very open and transparent. I came upon the lockers that the employees used, and not one of them had a lock on it. Okay, there was no locks. Okay, so everyone is very, very trusting of each other, which that says something about your organization in itself. So what you have here is you have 18,000 square feet of space. Almost all of it is visual. In other words, you can see it from anywhere. Okay, there's glass walls for the conference rooms, and everything is pretty open. How does that work for you?
So it's interesting. Everybody assumes that this is naturally how I want to be. I and many of the people here are introverts. And so there's an assumption that we all want to engage together all the time. However, what we do is we find that this works best, that we can actually see each other and talk to each other. And so while it is not the natural state for most of us and how we would like to function, we actually believe that being able to work in the same room where we can see each other and easily talk to each other is effectively the best way to communicate.
Okay, we talk about open space. Now, another thing, and I have very, very descriptive ways of identifying or explaining or visualizing what the environment looks like. It's very flexible. This morning, when we walked around the room, we saw a section where the project managers meet to do a kickoff meeting. And the furniture was set in a certain way. Within an hour of passing past that point, that entire section had been completely changed around to address a different type of a new project, a kickoff meeting, and a different structure. So your organization, the way I have it set up here, the way it says on the slide, is flexible, transformational, and creative. So I was actually seeing the Agile kind of flexibility that you see just in the environment. And just to be, again, as far as innovation goes, because of the continuous movement of the furniture around like that, you've actually looked into the furniture like aluminum tables that make it easy for one person to actually transform an area to meet the specific needs.
It's amazing how many organizations have limited themselves by some magic layout, and they struggle when the current layout does not match the way that the team is organized. Our organization does not have facilities people. We try not to bolt things to the floor. We want the team to reorganize the space around them to make the team as effective as possible.
Okay, now as far as this culture of learning, this is kind of an interesting thing. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Because what you have here is you have a different company that's actually working in your facility that is not part of your company, but they are actually part of some of your meetings, the stand-up that you do every day, and they are learning about the culture.
Yeah, before we have James answer that, can I switch back to microphone?
Okay. We have a slight technical issue that we're going to address, so just bear with us for a second.
Okay, please answer now. Thank you.
I'm not presenting now.
No, you have to tell me to present. But the microphone is not. This microphone is not.
This one?
No, that
one. Okay, what slide are they seeing?
Statement in.
No, that's not the one. Okay, back up. There we go. Okay, so anyway, as far as the culture of learning, you have a different company in here. They're not part of Menlo. They have their own little space, but it's part of your open space. Tell us about that. What do you mean by this culture of learning?
So a couple decades ago, Peter Senge wrote a book about learning organizations. And if you actually want your organization to succeed, the ability to adapt to new inputs and change on the fly is critical. We want our team to be able to adapt to new inputs. And part of that is also learning about the outside, learning about ourselves. One of the things that you've noted is that we've effectively adopted another team. There's a startup company that we're hosting. And it's actually not the first company that we've done this, but we're effectively incubating them, and they see enough of our culture that they want to adopt, that they came to us and said, could we cohabitate with you so that our team learns cultural values from your team as well as some of the processes? because they believe that will impact their long-term success.
Okay, now you also have, you're connected directly to a learning lab, a student learning lab. Tell us a little bit about that and why that's important and why you arranged it that way.
So right next to us and separated by a giant glass wall is the University of Michigan's TechArb. TechArb is a business incubator for students. So the students form companies as actual legal entities, go out into the world and try and find customers, develop products. And when we moved in right next to them, we felt that that was very similar in culture to what we want to have happen. We want our teams to always be thinking and trying to come up with new products and trying to help our customers think fresh new ideas. So we made sure we put a door between the two. And we will often mentor those students. And we find that this is a lot like exercise. You're better at doing this with your customers if you do it all the time. And so through practice, we're better when we need it as opposed to trying to be innovative only on 3 days a year.
Okay, and you know what? That kind of adds to the whole idea of being creative. And also another observation that I made is that this is a very young group of people. Okay, I'm not going to guess on the average age here, but I'm going to say that these are very young people, and this is a very, very different environment from what I would call the corporate environment. It's truly different. Now, we, during the walk around, we talked about visions and things like that. And we came up with this one thing that seems to be a theme around here called joyful. Okay, a joyful environment, but I also put in it's not always fun. So let's talk a little bit about that. You know, what do you mean by joyful, not always fun, and there is conflict? Can you explain a little bit about that?
So joy is not necessarily an emotion of the moment, although you can feel very joyful. Joy is being willing to deal with the sacrifices and the pains and the challenges for a long-term outcome and working with people that you trust, and it energizes you. When you're under stress but in a joyful team, you will work hard for the rest of your team. You see this in sports teams, you see this in academic teams, you see this in companies where they have an elite team working together. It might be stressful, it might be hard, but they believe in each other, they believe in the vision, they want to come to work in the morning. They want to get the project done, and it makes a tremendous difference. Now, it's interesting that you would comment on the age of our team, and I'm working from memory, so I might be off by just a bit, but we get that comment so often that our team's young, that we asked everybody to write down their name, threw it in a hat, or their age. The average age is 36. We have people here who have retired from other organizations and joined us. We have people in their 40s. We have people in their 50s. We have people in their 60s. We have people who are in their early 20s. But I think because of the energy level, and there are some young people, the assumption automatically translates that even when you see somebody who's here 60, your brain says young.
Well, I definitely saw young. Okay, so when you said 36, I was a little surprised. I thought it'd be a little bit less than that, but you know, and you also have a very, very vibrant group of people, and we're going to talk about this in a few minutes. But you do have the daily stand-up,
yes,
which involves everyone. In this particular morning, there were more than 50 people in this stand-up, and you accomplished all the information that needed to be done I'm not sure how
typically
much time.
About 13 minutes.
I was going to say it took about 15 minutes for 50 people to say this is what's going on
yes,
right now. And the interesting thing about that was that they really did know, they understood, and you can see how they're pairing together and so on. And we're going to talk a little bit about that too. So joyful is I want to come here. Not always fun is that we don't always agree.
Yes.
But you have what we'll call kind of constructive conflict here, where we're going to find
yes,
solutions. Okay, and we're going to talk a little bit more specifically about that as we go forward. So it is a very team-oriented structure. Like I said, very open, where people seem to really, you know, interact extremely well. So let me just move on to the next slide here so we can make that work here. Okay, we need to go to the next slide. Okay, great. Now, the environment, again, my impression of the environment was it looked immediately when I walked in, it looked like an art lab. It's very bright. It is colorful. They have very, very interesting
project names, which kind of caught my attention right away. They're just really, really interesting, and I think that adds to the creative environment of what you have established here. It's very bright. It's high energy. It looks like everybody, once they get in, there's no startup. It seems like they just get going right away. They jump right into it. Everybody's oriented to the facility. So overall, when you see that word innovations as part of your name, you're living this type of an environment, which is very, very flexible. Now, before we move on, I made a couple of notes. In fact, I spent the last couple of hours here going through each of the stations here, all the different areas, looking at the work that's being done. And we have a definite Agile environment, but it is really the Menlo version of Agile, and it's a combination of multiple types of Agile approaches that many of you might be familiar with. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. Let's move on to the next slide. Okay, so our mission. Now this is very important. This is something I'd really like you to talk about.
Sure.
Okay, and we were actually going through some of that this morning. But the mission, number one, reduce human suffering as it relates to technology. Can you talk about that a little bit?
So we believe that a mission needs to be audacious and big. So people are surprised that a little tiny company in a little tiny building in the middle of Ann Arbor is going to reduce human suffering as it relates to technology worldwide. We believe that we have to take small bites on that, but all too often what we see is you might get a new solution, a new technology, even a new phone. And it's amazing how long people struggle with this new phone or this new piece of software that's supposed to make their life better. And you see them frustrated and in pain, right? This happens all the time with all sorts of technologies. I can't even count how long it took my mother to deal with all the new features on her latest new car, right? This doesn't have to be the way. Unfortunately, often, particularly in the engineering disciplines, we like to explain why the product's that way and help users adapt to it. So what Menlo really focuses on is let's go understand the end users. Let's go study them through something we call high-tech anthropology. We go study the intended users in their native habitat, learn about that, learn about them, learn about their goals, and attempt to infuse those needs into every aspect of the project. So that is represented at every project update every week. It's manifest in how we actually write the requirements. And what we want to ultimately do is solve their problem, reduce their suffering, help them achieve their goal for a business outcome, which is widespread user adoption of whatever we've built, because that will help the company who's selling it.
Well, let me ask you a question about the high-tech anthropology, because we're sitting in a conference room and we can see that there's a desk out there that has, I think there were 4 people there, and there's more now, that were, you called them these software or something anthropologists. Now, most of the folks that are listening to this particular webinar probably have some idea of Agile, and you're probably thinking Scrum or XP or FDD or something like that. And there are specific names of people. In fact, some of these folks might even have heard the story of the chicken and the pig kind of thing as it relates to Agile. We have a product owner, and we have a Scrum Master, and we have developer and programmers and things like that. What is the role or the job of that high-tech anthropologist? What do they specifically do?
So the high-tech anthropologist is the representative of the end user throughout the process. Their job is to go study the end user, understand the end user, represent them in our discussions, take things that are going on in our project, devise tests for the assumptions we're making or design choices we're making, and take those tests out in the world and test that with the user. We believe that often organizations and teams try to simulate this by what we call kidnapping a user. They take somebody who used to be part of the user population, capture them, bring them into the project team, keep them as part of the project team until they no longer identify with the people they used to work with, and start explaining why the product or the new process works this way to their former coworkers. We would rather that users remain users, be passionate about what they do, and our high-tech anthropologists learn about them, represent their needs, and then apply their design skills and their solution-seeking skills that they bring from working on multiple projects to help come up with solutions that the users then say, once they see it, wow, I need that.
But what I heard was, direct connection to the user. So you're really very close. I mean, this is what a lot of people in IT, especially business analysts, are doing, getting really close to the customer, as close as you can possibly be to make sure that you're capturing their true needs. That really sounds like a major step. It's not something that I've read about in Agile in any of the forms that I've seen. So this is kind of a new title. It might be unique to Menlo, but it seems interesting.
By design, it is unique. It is trademarked. And we came across it because we were trying to decide how did we explain how our business analysts behave differently from a traditional business analyst. And when we hit upon the term and tried it, people would all go, yeah, that's it. And then they would ask us, what is it? And we said, that's the right answer. If they immediately recognize it, but then recognize that they don't know exactly what it means and ask us. Because if you say business analyst, everybody models it against somebody they already know. And business analysts do very different jobs in very different organizations.
That's true, but that's very unique. The term that you're using, the title, the anthropologist, is very unique and really gets to the core of getting to what the end users are looking for. Now, so we talked about the reduced human suffering as it relates to technology. Your main goal, basically, is you're solving problems, okay?
Yes.
What problems are we solving here?
So we have clients that bring us all sorts of projects. Maybe they're working on a diagnostic tool to look at engines and all the computers, and so we would then help them design a product that makes sense to mechanics rather than engineers. We've had customers come to us with large medical systems that they want, again, the staff to understand and help build. So we've done an organ transplant information system for a large hospital. We've worked on designing glucosometers for patients who, in their daily lives have to measure their own glucose. We've helped people who have things that seem perhaps not as critical to others who do not participate, but if they're doing a dog show and they want to score the dog show, right? There are people who are passionate about this, people who are organized, they want to know how their dog's done over time. We help them design a system that works well for those stakeholders.
Well, and actually, if you mentioned something, I wanted to bring it up before about this open environment, and it's very different. There are several dogs there that are brought in here. I've seen a few pets that are just surprisingly happy here in this big, wide open area. So you just get an idea that this is not your unique approach to getting things done. The environment is just very relaxed, and people seem very comfortable, and the dogs do also.
Well, very relaxed, but also very focused.
Yeah, a very focused group. That's one thing I would say I took away from this immediately. Now, it says... again, it's the Menlo way of doing things. So it's Agile, but it's Agile that works for you, not necessarily Scrum or any of the other ones that we talked about. But what we're doing here, and I thought many of the items that we had in our discussion, modifying project management to meet the client's needs, which really has a lot to do with that anthropologist, the setup that you have, the transparency and things like that. I have in parentheses value all around. So you're creating value for your company, but you're also creating value for the client. So how are you modifying project management to meet your client's needs?
So ultimately, we have to produce value for the customer. And that's easy to say, and everybody throws it out there. And so I'll give some interesting examples where we've tried to change the game a little bit. So, for example, we are a services organization. We provide professional services and design software interfaces and building that software for our customers. We believe that we can be successful, so what we do is we say, look, you can pay us in commodities other than cash. So our preferred model is you pay us half in cash and half in stock of your organization. If we're doing a strategic project for your organization, we believe we will increase the value of your organization, so the stock that you paid us with will appreciate in value. If that doesn't happen, we'll pay the same penalty as every one of your shareholders. And so we try to tie our short-term measurements and goals and the ways we think about your project to your long-term goals. The way we measure user satisfaction is widespread user adoption. Right? We had a small customer here in town that we worked with to build a scientific instrument. We felt very good when we achieved 33% of the worldwide market against large companies.
Pretty amazing. I just want to point out that when we got here this morning, which was about 8:30 a.m., we met James right away, and we went right into the tour. And the environment is set up to really absorb sound. It's been engineered to be in an open environment, but still not to be too noisy or anything like that. So it's been structured in such a way to keep the noise down. But you might hear that there is a little buzz in the background because people have passed their kickoff meetings. We passed the stand-up meeting that they have every day. From the stand-up meetings, they have these smaller meetings to talk about something of specific interest to a smaller group. And then they went back to their kickoff meeting for a while, and now they're actually engaged in doing work. So you can hear a little bit of a buzz in the background, but it is really kind of the way things go each day here, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so let's move on to the next slide. Now, we're going to talk about how it works, okay? And it is Agile, but like I said, it is your version of Agile, which is a combination of multiple things. So I have down here, it is a combination of extreme programming, Scrum, and the PMBOK guide. I originally said it's a little bit of each, but then James said, no, it's really a lot of each. So can you explain how you have taken these concepts, like the PMBOK guide is really different than when we'll say Agile, but you do have project managers, and you have what I think you call them paired project managers.
Yes.
But your approach here is very, very different than what I would call traditional project management. It doesn't resemble much of traditional project management, except that one of the key factors that you brought up several times is this, a lot of it is based on the concept of the work breakdown structure. So maybe you could talk a little bit about the Menlo way, this combination of these different techniques, and how you put it together into an agile environment that works for you.
So I believe that a lot of people will ask it the same way, and I think the first thing I'll dispute is, what does it mean to be traditional? I think Menlo actually represents a lot of traditional project management. It may not be the common project management that's used, particularly in large teams or where we disperse people across multiple organizations. But if you think of most projects in organizations as they were forming, even the smallest companies, sitting around a kitchen table in Silicon Valley, right, they're trying to come up with a plan. They're not working just completely independently. They start by putting a list up on a whiteboard. They write it down on a piece of paper. They put sticky notes on, right? And they learn to improve their project management practices as their team gets bigger. What I think often gets lost is that somehow we believe that these fundamental strong practices become better with automated technology and tools. And often I think what gets lost is the fundamental knowledge of how you are actually doing the project management. It's not the software that you put the work breakdown structure into, it's the strength of your work breakdown structure. And I've even seen that when people teach classes on basic project management, they'll often have people build their first work breakdown structure on index cards and sticky notes. And then after they get the idea, then they'll have them put it in the software. What's truly different here is that we try to focus on the fundamentals. We want to have a strong work breakdown structure. We want to have strong communications between the team. We want to have all the things you see in the PMBOK. I can go section by section by section and describe. We just don't get complicated about what the tools are. And so we actually write our work breakdown structures on index cards. Often people will say you can't do that for a large project. My new canned response is we don't do large projects here. We do only small and medium-sized projects. And some of those medium-sized projects are a couple 100,000 hours with teams of 20 people. And what we do is we make sure everybody sits near the corkboard that has all their index cards on it. And so over time, we might have a project that lasts for multiple years, gets updated as we go, and we can end up with a project that historically has over 10,000 story cards, which are actually handwritten on index cards. We do make digital copies, we store them, we make sure we have audit logs. But the tools that make things storable, that make them shareable across distance, do not necessarily make it better for the team. And so one of my favorite quotes in the PMBOK, most versions previously, the most effective team is to put a team in a war room where they can see each other face to face and work together on the project. The number of people I've met who say that's just not feasible or that's impossible with teams bigger than 4, Menlo simply ran the experiment. We wanted to know whether you could do that with a team of 50, so we got a room that's 18,000 square feet, and it works.
Well, I saw it work this today, and I was so amazed. And like I said, everyone knew what was going on. Everyone was comfortable explaining things, but they also knew that this was the time to do it, which is a kind of a regimen you do every day. We're going to have this meeting, and then they go off back. So it doesn't really matter what they're engaged in. When it's time for this meeting, everybody goes to this meeting. It's a big circle. It is a stand-up meeting for sure, and people are right to the point and move on. But I want to point out one more thing, though, that also, besides the work that needs to be done and people understanding which project is getting started, and there were several people involved in kickoffs today.
Yes.
Okay. But they also incorporate a little bit of, besides work, we've got some extracurricular activity, team building things going on. So people kind of knew that, yeah, by the way, besides work, at 9 o'clock tonight, there's this thing going on. And this weekend, we're doing river rafting or something like that. So people are really in the know about everything that's going on with the company.
By working closely together, right, so the whole concept of pairing, right, so we'll have two people doing work together at one keyboard. It's not divide the work and go separate. So when you're collaborating, you literally share a keyboard and one computer. I joke that sometimes it saves us money because we have half as many computers as we have people, but obviously computers are inexpensive these days. If you spend an entire week working at a keyboard with somebody else, you get to know them pretty well. In an organization, you swap partners and trade out, so you get a new partner every week. When you work this closely, you build personal relationships. You build the trust. You care about these people. You actually develop an affinity for folks that share outside interests. And so, yes, those people will sometimes organize outside activities and go off and do that. And that's great. I think it's a demonstration of how strong the team is. But we don't believe it works in reverse. By artificially creating a night out for everybody to go to the bar and sit together doesn't create a stronger team. Mm-hmm. A strong team tends to go do things together outside of work.
Okay, now I'm going to switch over a little bit. I see a question that came in from Violet here, and these are unprepared questions. I mean, we don't know exactly what's coming up, but what Violet is saying is, does Agile work when a company has multiple locations and teams are working remotely? What do you think about that?
I think that's harder. I know some teams that do it. We've done it for a couple extraordinary circumstances. We choose not to traditionally. We believe that there is strategic advantage in working all in the same room. And because we are effectively investing in our customers, we prefer that all the projects we do for them maximize the value. So we work really hard to make sure everybody's here. However, we have had team members who had challenges in their families, a sick relative or something, and needed to go off and be with them. And normally we have to do all the work in the room. So instead what we do is that person pairs with somebody here, and they share the same keyboard remotely. And we have them physically here by using a visual communication like Skype or FaceTime. I've seen other teams try to do this with some kind of virtual presence. Mm-hmm. I think the challenge there for most organizations is it's really hard to build the trusting, deep relationship via Skype, via FaceTime, right? Our team is able to function going on because they know each other very well. So when you see small visual cues, I mean, the beautiful part of being able to be visually sharing with somebody and being able to see their face is there's a broader set of communication. But if you don't know them or their culture, you don't know what it means. And so there are challenges, but I think there are also lessons to be learned and pieces that can be borrowed and can improve some of the challenges that all teams face.
Yeah, I think that's pretty unique to have this remote, but you're sharing the same information so that they're together even though they're separate. But ideally, it is better to have that face-to-face kind of an environment. Right?
Anytime you shorten the communication links, right, and there are all sorts of games that people will play at project management conferences, right, to demonstrate this, things will go smoother.
Okay, that's a key little phrase there. I just wrote it down, shorten the communication links. That is really a critical thing because you get things done much, much quicker, real time. Now, we have another question here. Okay. This gets back to the meeting. So I want you to really talk about the importance of having that daily meeting. But Juan says, sometimes it is not possible to have a daily meeting. It is a must, or could another, it says, let's see what it says. It says, could another, okay, I'm not getting the full question there. So he didn't complete it, but I'm going to guess that he's saying here that it's not possible to have a daily meeting. Is it a must, or can we do something different? So what are your comments about the the daily meeting? Why is that so important, and why is it a must?
So when we transitioned to this work style back in 1999, I was a consultant working with a VP of product development at a company. And ultimately the target for our stand-up meeting was, we knew that it had taken hold and the team valued it, and it was actually producing value for the team, not just the bosses, when the team would hold the meeting without us. So we would strategically choose not to go to stand-up meetings to see whether the team would look around and say there are no bosses and go back to what they were doing, or if they would hold the meeting, which meant that we had finally achieved they were getting value from the meeting. So I don't know of a single day in the last 12 years that there's been an instance where the stand-up meeting did not occur at Menlo. If everybody in the entire company, except for 2 people, went outside to take a picture for something and there were 2 people left, it is my belief that they would actually stand up and hold the stand-up meeting with 2 people.
But it will take place.
I believe that's absolutely the case. And we have less dramatic examples where it actually has. And we even had a pair of folks who were out at a client site visiting with a client who decided, hey, it's about that time of day, and they couldn't connect to us remotely. They stood up in a cube and had the meeting between the 2 of them.
So they had a stand-up meeting where they couldn't connect to the actual meeting on the prem here, so they had a stand-up meeting themselves just to not break the this recurring thing that kind of keeps the company going.
Which, for me, shows that the team says there's value in it. And I think we can always improve on it. But it's interesting how often when you have something that you need, an answer that you need, it's best to ask everybody else in the company, because you don't know what backgrounds they have. You don't know what neighbors they have. You don't know where the answer is going to come from. And the stand-up meeting for us is 13 minutes a day. And you can ask a question like, does anybody know a biochemist who works with the following chemicals, because we need to talk to somebody about that for this project. And you will get the strangest people in your mind responding because you didn't think they had a relationship with that, and it turns out their uncle is that person.
So this becomes pretty critical, and it's actually great for keeping the information flowing for the company, keeping everybody in the know, but also branching out when you need to go to something that you just don't have maybe tangible on-prem, that somebody's going to know how to get there.
Yes.
What I did notice during the stand-up meeting was after it was completed, that there were some small groups met to talk something specific about what someone else had said during the meeting. So what you have is the company-wide stand-up meeting, and then there were small groups, and I'm not going to call them actually stand-up meetings, but they got together, 2 or 3 people, and they were discussing some very specific things. One was a kickoff meeting, one was a problem that somebody had, when somebody had a question about something that someone else was doing, and it seemed to be a very efficient way to address things like right then and there.
So a critical component of our stand-up meeting is that people really echo what they're doing. Who am I? What project am I on? Who am I working with? What problems do I need solved? People can raise their hand and say, I can help you solve that. They don't solve it in the meeting. You simply get to make the connection, talk to me afterwards, which is the only way you can have a meeting that has 50 to 85 people take 13 minutes and everybody participate. So you simply make the connections, and then afterwards they decide how they're going to solve that, either in a quick conversation afterwards or in some other future contact that they schedule.
So what you've done is you've given everybody a little bit of a lesson learned here that, let's make sure we know what's going on. So everybody has, I hate to use the term, but pulse of the company kind of thing. And then efficient use of meeting time, that only those people that really need to be talking about a certain thing talk about it. Everybody else goes back and does their job. So the key word then is efficiency.
We also do another subtle thing, back to a previous point of learning. Our company has a lot of engineers. A lot of these engineers have not spent their career public speaking. They need to look eloquent in front of customers. They need to be able to speak effectively, to talk to peers. While that happens a lot in our organization, in the stand-up meeting, everybody talks. So by practicing every single day in front of a large audience, our engineers get better and better at communicating for when they actually need it.
So that's another added value of that stand-up meeting.
Absolutely.
I didn't read that in any book, by the way, so that's kind of a unique thing. Now, a couple more. I'm going to take a few more questions from the folks that are listening. But we did talk about daily meeting, which is really something. It's a ritual kind of thing. You're going to do it every day, and it's very important. I think we got the key points on that. I have modeling to meet customer needs. We talked about that earlier with the anthropologists and so on. Is there anything else that you might want to add to that to make sure that we are really when I was talking to one of your clients who is here on-prem,
Yep.
you say about 10 hours a week or so, doing things, that he is connecting with the folks in your organization and making sure that we're addressing those things that are priorities. He's setting the priorities for them. He's looking for the work that's being done. Can we say anything more about the modeling that takes place to meet your customer needs?
Well, and it might be slightly askew from where we were headed originally, but there's a really important point that comes to mind from this. We need to model the behaviors inside of our team about how we take care of customers. And there's a brilliant quote I've heard from a colleague. You will never actually treat your customers better than you treat your coworkers. You'll put on airs, you'll be kind, you'll try and be a little bit more protective, but if you're not treating your peers in an organization with great respect, it is incredibly unlikely, possibly even impossible, for you to treat your customers with great respect. Because respect requires honesty and transparency and humility. And so if you're not practicing that every day, right? And so we model the way we engage with customers in the way that we behave with each other. And that starts from the executives, and it involves everybody in how they treat peers. And so every learning opportunity in how we have a human interaction is a training opportunity for how we deal with our customers. And often our customers are a team that we're sent over, a committee of people from different departments, and often we have to model good behavior for them because they don't know how to function as an effective team together when they're engaged with us.
So there's a real strong connection between you and your customers, between your team members and the organization as a whole.
Absolutely.
Now, let's talk a little bit about the paired idea here. We have I saw two project managers. You called them paired project managers.
Yes.
And also paired programming. And I thought that was kind of interesting because I made a note about OJT every day kind of thing,
Yes.
learning the language. Can you talk about how that's working here, this idea of paired programming, which some people don't necessarily feel comfortable with? How did you make it work here?
So pair programming is often described in a lot of Agile. It's not practiced at very many organizations. Those who do it tend to either do a little bit or, like us, they do it all the time. And so a key aspect of deciding to do pairing is whether or not you believe fundamentally, when we talk particularly about programmers, is the gating factor on how efficient they can be, how fast they can type. And I know of no organization that has a speed typing test for programmers when they hire them, because theoretically a programmer who types 120 words per minute would be 4 times more efficient than a programmer who types 30 words per minute. But yet, when organizations look at a team that does pair programming, they assume it's twice as much effort. And the reality is that programming is a communication, debugging, thinking sport. And teams that are sitting together have to learn how to communicate and effectively think things through. And when you pair, what you really need to do is talk to your partners and explain what the concepts are. And if you can't express it without writing it down, if you can't code it, you can't explain it before coding it, you probably do not have a fully thought out idea. And so our teams actually end up doing all sorts of interesting subtle behaviors. If you and I were working together, we're talking about the idea, we're discussing it on the fly, almost by accident we're transmitting it to the other members of our team because they're pair programming on the other side of the table. You and I decide to delete something that's not needed. In organizations I used to run, we'd find out about that 2 weeks later, 3 weeks later when everything gets integrated, and we'd have 3 weeks of meetings to try and figure out what happened or how to solve it, and how to save the sunk cost. Our organization finds most of these things in real time because the entire team's talking to each other. We still make the same mistakes, but because they're smaller, we don't have to make a big deal about it, and we back them up, and we figure out what the right way is to go about. The other interesting thing is everybody on the team builds a stronger relationship and learns about each other. So perhaps you're really strong at algorithms. If I pair with you for a week, I truly learn to appreciate that, and I also learn how to effectively communicate with you. Now, later when I'm pairing with somebody else and we need help with an algorithm, I just ask across the table because I know that's what you're really good at and draw you in. And so the team becomes much better at using their collective knowledge and talents together as a team. And then the ultimate answer that we've run into about pair programming, and we have some clients who specifically use us because they had this problem. A team member leaves. The critical team member who knows this piece of knowledge that can actually do things for you, they either go somewhere else
or in the case of some of our clients, they pass away, and there is nobody else who knows how to fix that code. Ultimately, paired programming and rotating and co-ownership means that the organization is not held hostage to individuals. It feels like an imbalance because sometimes people realize, oh my gosh, now the company can just get rid of me at any time. I could parade in any number of programmers who are sitting 20 feet from here, ask them that question in front of us now, and they would say, yeah, I was first worried about that, but you know what's so cool is I can take a vacation anytime I want. The Menlo vacation policy is you go over and you register your vacation time on the email system at Out, and you send that in, and it is always approved. Doesn't matter if next week is the most important week with a particular client and you've been key to stuff, everybody here is replaceable. That means you get tremendous freedom. You get to work on new projects, you get to learn new technologies, you get to go on vacation, you get to go to your daughter's birthday party because it just so happens to coincide with some really important meeting, and you take care of your family first, and everybody here understands that.
The interesting thing about that was one of your people came back today after being on vacation for
2 months.
2 months vacation, and she came back this morning, and she was right back into the thick of things in minutes. So, and she was a very happy, refreshed person from what I could see. So that is definitely not your typical work environment, that you can have that kind of flexibility to do what you want to do when you want to do it, and you still get the work done. Somebody's getting the work done.
And if you had come to us 2.5 months ago, we would have described Lisa as the primary project manager on our most important account with our most important client. And she left for 2 months, and we didn't skip a beat.
Now, one of the things I want to mention here, and we're going to have to take some questions before we start to wrap up here, but they do give tours here. They've given quite a few tours, and there are different tour arrangements that if you get in touch with the Menlo Innovations directly, you can find out more about that. But it's one thing talking about it and talking to one of the founders of it. Seeing it is very different. And I wanted to bring one more thing up before we start taking these questions. But you have something called I think you called it a bug board. I'm pretty sure.
So we describe it as our bug database because everybody expects it. But yes, it's a big cork board. Okay, so it's a cork board, and the entire floor here is like one big cork board where you can stick stuff on the wall just about anywhere. So they're maximizing every bit of space available. But the bug board, for those of you that are familiar with risk management, it looks something like a probability impact matrix, where we have a probability of occurring an impact of the bug on the software, and the one box that has the least amount of boxes notes in it happens to be the high probability, high impact, and those become the priority. And you can see how it's, as the customer comes in, it's the customer that's actually setting the priorities of handling these bugs. It's not someone independently doing it. And you brought up something earlier today about making sure that we're doing the right work at the right time. Work authorization you mentioned, which is different than making changes and scheduling and so on. But that if you're going to work on something, it's got to be very meaningful and it's going to have the most value to it. Otherwise, why are you working on it? Well, I think part of the challenge is when people hear about Agile, the first thing they ask, is it more efficient? Can I get more done? There's nothing magical about it. It's not a silver bullet. It doesn't magically solve problems. What the goal of Agile is to say, if we were to focus our available effort on the most important work and do that first, could we have a better outcome? And so part of this is not trying to do more, but actually trying to do the parts that are most important. And that requires collaboration with the customer. The team that's executing the project knows things that the other stakeholders don't, but value and cost and value and the things that go into a project do not always correlate in the way that the project team would imagine. Sometimes the least expensive, smallest changes have huge benefit to the customer, and you need them as part of the team to actually participate in figuring that out. And that's actually one of the key values of Agile, is making them a full honored member of the team and changing the process so they can participate rather than they have to become a geek who can talk about construction or a geek that can talk about software before they can play.
Okay, you know what I'm going to do? We have a bunch of questions here, and some of them are addressed specifically in Agile approach. And one of the questions came in a little bit later. This is from Joseph can't make out the last name, but Joseph asked a question. It says, in the stand-up meeting, Scrum has 3 questions. What does Menlo do? Now, I just want to point out that Menlo is a combination of multiple Agile approaches kind of rolled into what works best for them. What is it that you want to get out of that meeting? In the stand-up meeting, Scrum has 3 questions. What does Menlo do?
So Menlo is very formulaic. We pass around a speaking token so you know who's talking. Classically,
the speaking token, by the way, is a Viking helmet.
Usually. And so the pair partners each hold 1 horn. Each partner says their name, even though we know each other, but there might be guests in the room, and we don't check to see first if there are guests. We always say our names. Then one member of the team will say what project they're on. They'll then describe which story card they're working on next. And if there's anything that can make them go faster or any problem they need solved or question they need answered, they simply state it. And occasionally, depending on who they are, they might bring up an all-company purpose meeting answer like, hey, we'd like to go kayaking next week. Anybody let me know afterwards, or my son scored their first soccer goal, and the team will cheer because, again, they're sharing with each other. But the key goal is, what project am I on? Who am I working with? What would make us go faster with this problem? And then they pass it along.
Okay. Now, I'm going to bounce around a little bit here. The question is, do you store project artifacts for external audit purposes?
Yes, we are required to because some of our projects are in regulated industries. So most of our work with project artifacts are done with physical artifacts. We prefer index cards for our work breakdown structures and work authorization boards. We prefer large pieces of foam core that are 3 foot by 4 foot to actually put mock-ups and so forth on. We build lots of cardboard mock-ups of products. All of that stuff gets digitized and put into an electronic storage system in our servers. It's there. It's auditable. We don't use it out of that system because we find that people engage better with the physical artifacts in the real space. But we keep those all updated because, A, it's good project management practice, but we find a lot of organizations say, well, you know, it'd be a lot easier than if we just work with them in that format. And all of our experience with all those tools is you make everybody's life a little bit harder and make the project manager's life a lot easier. And if I add the total cost across my organization, it doesn't add up. So yeah, our project managers do a lot more facilitation work, a lot more grunt work, but it's all with project content. And yet we still manage to produce an audit trail.
Okay, now there's a question here. Might take a little bit of detail to answer this, but maybe you can help them out. It says, our team has a problem breaking down index cards or user stories to be done in 1 to 2 days. What's your approach on that? And I know you have the index cards. I've seen hundreds of them out here. You have work broken down by these certain sheets and so on. How do you manage that effectively?
So part of that is practice, and it's work breakdown decomposition, right? And so one of my favorite slides in some of my presentations is I show Kent Beck's version of XP where it says you should write stories on index cards. They involve you describe the user and the functionality that they'll get. Tell me a little bit about the user, and it should never be bigger than 2 weeks worth of work. Then if you take some of the earlier versions of the PMBOK, it describes a work package as deliverables oriented, describe the outcomes and the features, and it shouldn't take more than 80 hours. They look remarkably similar. I don't believe most people who have contributed to PMBOK have read Kent Beck's work, and I'm pretty confident Kent Beck has never read the PMBOK. I think there's some intuitive understanding that if you can't break something down into work chunks that require 2 weeks or 1 week or even smaller, then there's more variability in the outcome. And so my personal belief is that people get better at writing story cards after they've actually written probably about 1,000 story cards. This is also true probably about playing golf. Clearly, I've not yet gotten anywhere close to 1,000 holes of golf because I'm not very good at it yet. But part of its practice makes better. And there are lots of techniques and so forth, but the same fundamental techniques that you can find inside of PMI references on how to do work package decomposition work inside of breaking down story cards because they're the same thing. And the simplest thing I tell people is just, if you could only afford half of it, what would you have and what would you buy? Write that down. Now take everything that's an option that you'd add on and add that on the second card, right? Or anytime you find a conjunction, it does this and this and this and this. Okay, stick the ands in between the story cards.
Now you have a poster somewhere. It's a large poster of a story card. We took a picture of it earlier today, and we also looked at your boards where the story cards are developing, the stories are developing, and you can see that they are evolving a little bit. That the first time we might write one, it needs a little bit of work and so on. But as you said before, the more you practice it, the better they're getting at it. And in Agile, and even in project management, and even in requirements, and even in risk management, there's a certain syntax that's used.
Yes.
Okay, and you have developed a card that helps them to write their stories in a very clear way on that one index card.
And interestingly, we will depart from our standard format, particularly under the condition that if our story cards are not speaking to the stakeholders. And again, PMBOK teaches you this. It's not an effective communication if it's not including the external stakeholders. We will modify the way we're working. We will draw only pictures on them. We will use the verbology that they use. We will try and, because we need the expert stakeholders to feel as full participants. And so we have a standard format that makes life easier for us. We believe it makes it easier for customers, but we modify it to make sure we get stakeholder engagement.
Okay, now there was a question, I think we answered this earlier, but I'm just going to bring it up and we'll go on quickly. But it says, does Agile work when the company has multiple locations and teams are working remotely? We did talk about using sharing keyboards, using some kind of a Skype type of a technology or anything like that. But in a nutshell, can Agile work in an organization that's really, really spread out to multiple locations?
I think the biggest question is, Agile is a major cultural shift and potentially a reorganization. It's not a bunch of little tactical tricks and practices, even though it can appear that way. And if you ultimately want to make Agile work in large organizations, and we've seen it happen, sometimes what that really means is reorganizing around a number of small local teams that can effectively take on projects that are part of a bigger program. And so the simplest answer is, yeah, I've seen a lot of large companies, because it's all remote and just physically dispersed, simply accept that challenge, when what they could do is take the two people in the same location and move them closer together so that the two people who are on the same project in the same facility could communicate more effectively. And if they did that with everybody in all their different locations, that would probably have a positive impact in their project. But it would be hard. It takes work.
Okay, I'm going to ask one more question here before we start to wrap up here. It says, what are some of the things that you do on a daily basis for keeping the team motivated?
So the beautiful part is it's not me. The biggest things that happen on a daily basis is, well, okay, so I encourage them to give feedback to each other. Oddly enough, while they want positive feedback from me, and that's one of the things I need to continuously work on, because I am not the cheerful sprinkling unicorns and fairies across the room kind of guy, getting them to talk to each other, because peer feedback is actually more valued in my experience and in the academic literature than the bosses giving you positive feedback. If your peers respect you, that is far more valuable. And getting people to share that with each other. And even today, right before lunch, somebody came and shared with me a positive story about somebody else. I went and grabbed that other person and said, we got to tell them now so I can be part of it, because I'll forget.
Okay, we're going to have to wrap up here, but you have a weekly show and tell where the customer is actually listening to what your team has accomplished.
We got to visit with the customer every week.
And what happens at that show and tell?
Rather than give them a status report, we read off all the accomplishments, all the work packages we think we've completed, the story cards, and we have the customer demonstrate the feature to us. They put their hands on the keyboard and show it to us. So we know at least one person on the business stakeholder team, the client team, has actually experienced it, rather than have yet another report they're not reading.
Okay, so these last few items here, and then I'll put up the PDU slide. You mentioned Menlo's version of a project management software. Now, that's kind of interesting because it's not like any software you've ever seen. But can you quickly talk a little bit about that? As far as the continuous OJT, we mentioned that in paired programming, where even if the programmer doesn't know a language, the other person can show, and before you know it, they become a lot more versatile in these different languages. Your environment is getting things done in real time, and you're using the agile techniques of the stand-up meetings, the moving things forward, the story cards, the paired
short
iterations. You're doing all these different things. And so I just wanted to kind of close out on your software and that change management aspect. Okay?
So we typically don't use software for our project management. We take our story cards and we put estimates on them, and then we have we basically size them. The cards are physically different sizes so that a card that will take 8 hours is half the size of a card that's 16. And we lay out a spatial relationship on a table with some techniques that we have, but basically say your budget's this big, and we turn that into dimensional space on a table. Here's all the cards you can schedule, and there's always more cards than there is budget. And we say put the things inside the budget that fit, that you think are top priority, and things that don't fit inside the budget, everybody can see. So we actually have typically on a project, 50% of the defined work packages are not in budget, and we've declared they're not going to get done. So there's not ambiguity about the feature you wanted. Gee, it must be in one of these other things, right? It's clearly on the table, not authorized. And then the change management, I mean, the simplest and shortest version of that is I would tout a book by some authors that I've met called Influencer. Influencer describes there is no way to change an organization through sheer will or trying harder. And they have many case studies in this book where they take on huge problems in our society that have nothing to do with the typical projects we do in software. They want to help people who've been in prison their entire lives. They want to change an entire tribe's strategy for getting water in Africa so that they don't get waterborne parasites. You have to change the environment. You have to change how peers respond to each other. You have to change at least 6 different quadrants. I'm sure that's wrong somehow. 6 different areas. And be systematic and thoughtful about it, because ultimately if you leave it to willpower and knowledge, it's not enough.
Well, one of the things that I saw was that your organization is, I use a term called change ready, okay, and in an agile type of an environment such as yours, part of it is being ready to change to meet the customer's needs.
Yes.
And I saw that actually happening today. Your physical space kind of transformed itself almost daily depending on the needs and who's going to be here, between the tours, between customers coming in, the process that you follow, the movement of teams around. So it's very, very adaptive to change, but you also have a process for managing the change on projects, making sure that people know what has changed and when, and this is continuing flow of information. So, well, we're kind of out of time here, and just so those of you that are still here, thank you for joining us. You'll notice on the bottom it says November 7th, 2013 is International Project Management Day. I would encourage you to do a couple of things here. One is that you should go to www.menloinnovations.com to get more information. And also, if you had questions, we have something, email at experience@menloinnovations.com. So they're very responsive. Like I said, they're very flexible. They were happy to allow us to come in and do this interview. We learned an awful lot. It is a very unique organization. A webinar does not do it justice. There's just so much here to see, and you really have to kind of, envelop yourself in what's going on here. One other curious thing is that they did have a high school student in here today taking notes and studying this technique, which I thought was awesome in itself. So it really is an amazing place. It is agile in action, no question about it. It is the Menlo way, really, which is a blend of many different project management, agile type functions to get things done. And the phone number here is 734-665-1847. And you can go to menloinnovations.com, or experience is the email, experience@menloinnovations.com. And it's just a great place to go and really learn about how Agile is working day in and day out every single day, and people don't appear to be too stressed. So, James, thank you very much for allowing us to be in here. We might have to come back again for another one of these.
That'd be fun.
All right, thank you very much, and thank you all for being on the call. Don't forget your PDUs. It's one PDU. It's Category B. And eventually this particular program will be put up on the website once we get it all recorded, so that you can come back and visit it again, and also tell other associates that might be interested in hearing about this, this live Agile environment. So thank you again. This is Frank Salatis, and again, don't forget about November 7, 2013, International Project Management Day. Thank you.